former senior advisor to the president, Kevin Hassett, and your host, CPAC board member, former Representative Bob Beaupre.
Gentlemen, how you doing, CPAC? Getting ready for a big finish today, aren't we? Well, I've been looking forward to this panel for a long while, and news being what it is, I'm finding that I'm even more excited about it. I'm going to start off with something that's not really about Joe Biden's breadlines, the economy, or inflation, but something that's very, very current. We've got Larry Elder here, and I think you've got fans, man.
One or two. Love you.
Is anybody my fan? All right, we've all got fans. Larry, I'm guessing from our short conversation backstage that you've got some insight about our new Supreme Court nominee. Tell us what's on your heart.
Well, I don't know that much about her. She was a district court judge for a long time, wrote a lot of opinions. She was very briefly on the D.C. Court of Appeals. I don't think she's written an opinion until just a few days ago, so I don't know that much about her decisions. I do know this, that Chief Justice John Roberts, during the confirmation, said a judge's job is to call balls and strikes. I don't know why it's relevant for the race or gender of an umpire. Should only a black umpire call balls and strikes for a black baseball batter or for a black pitcher? Should a Latino umpire call balls and strikes for a black pitcher or a black batter? A judge's job is to be fair. I just ran for governor, as you know, and all I know, it wasn't... Bob, it wasn't a black female reporter who referred to me as the black face of white supremacy. It wasn't a white male reporter who called my views black supremacist and called Stephen Miller a hate monger. So the job of a judge is to be fair. And we ought not be choosing judges based upon race, ethnicity, or gender. And I criticized Ronald Reagan when he said the same thing before he appointed Sandra Day O'Connor. I criticized Donald Trump before he appointed Amy Coney Barrett, and I'm criticizing Joe Biden for doing the same thing. We ought not be doing that.
Thank you. Thanks for standing up, man. I knew I had the right guy out here. Thank you very much for that. Now let's talk about the economy and inflation. 89% when asked, you guys know all these poll numbers, but 89% of voters say that when they cast their ballot this fall, the economy is going to be very or extremely important to them. 83% say the same about inflation, about 76% say that about taxes. So this is topical. This is top of mind stuff. And when they say economy, they're talking about economy and inflation. And when they say inflation, they're talking about inflation and the economy. Larry, you're on radio every day. You're talking to people all across the country every day. What are you hearing from folks? Are these numbers close to accurate, or are they just...
No, absolutely. People are concerned about the prices of everything going up. Gas prices are going up, grocery prices are going up, prices of a home are going up, prices for used and new cars are going up. And AOC, who got a degree in economics, says that the only way to get this down is to pass Build Back Better. And she argues that the reason for the higher prices is because of the supply chain. One of my frequent guests on my program is Leo Haney, and I know you know him, Kevin. He's an economist from UCLA. And he talks about the printing of money that we've been doing for a very long period of time. The supply of money, M2, has gone up like crazy. The inflation is caused by bad government policies, and we've had bad government policies that have printed money and printed money and printed money. We've also paid people not to work. And you add it all up, it's a perfect storm. And this is under the Biden administration.
Kevin, I want to go to you. You're a little bit like me. if I can say that. We're kind of numbers guys. We dig into the data. There you go. Economic.
Let's hear it for numbers.
Economic geeks. Yeah. Jen Psaki tells us every day, the president, when we see him once in a great while, tells us that all is well. And they like to point to a GDP that is pretty robust. But they also like to tell us that these jobs are getting created. What do you see in the data? I know you study it pretty carefully.
Yeah, sure. You know, like first, you know, Larry Kudlow, didn't he do a great job, everybody?
Sure did.
You know, and Larry and I and Mercy, we used to hang out in the Oval with President Trump, and we would be talking about how to make the economy better. And I swear that the craziest, stupidest idea we ever saw anyone come up with doesn't compare to what Joe Biden's been doing to this economy. And like, think about it, he calls it Build Back Better. But if you look at the way they're spending the money, they're not building anything. There's nothing better, right? And they're proposing all this stuff we've never done before, like spending money on this new age energy and things like that. So we're not going back to anything either. So it's not building, it's not back, it's not better. It's just an attempt to destroy the country. And Larry Kudlow has led an incredibly good effort to stop it. But the reason we have to stop it is inflation is out of control. And a metric of how crazy politics is now, and how, I guess there are fewer media folks here now, and how the media lets them get away with it, is that the White House has been bragging about how wage growth was like 4% last year. And wow, isn't that great wage growth? That's really high wage growth compared to like most years since World War II. But inflation was up 7.5%. And so that means everybody lost 3.5%. Okay, and so people are worse off right now, and they're the people that are calling up Larry and talking about the fact that they go to the gas pump and it's $5 a gallon now in California. And then you go, no kidding, I went to a McDonald's and it was $7 for a Big Mac. I love Big Macs, but you know, maybe they were gouging at this McDonald's, but the fact is that those prices are higher, and they're higher because of Biden's failed policies. So we could dig into that, but you know, final thought, that when President Trump took office, the Democrats told everybody, they had these two words, they're really boring words, but they're called secular stagnation. And they were saying it all the time, and they said, well, sure, the economy stinks, and wages haven't grown in a decade, but it's not President Obama's fault. It's like the Martians. There's this thing called secular stagnation, which means we can never grow again. And President Trump just wouldn't accept it, right? And now they're going to come up with other excuses for why the economy's terrible. It's not their fault. But everybody here at CPAC knows it is their fault. And that's one of the things that we've learned over the last few days.
I got to give Joe Biden credit for one thing, one promise fulfilled. He said he would have a historic administration.
There isn't anything that's better. Not the borders. Almost 2 million people tried to enter the border illegally. They've got about 300,000 getaways. They weren't tested for COVID. We talked about the economy. Inflation is completely, totally out of control, paying people not to work. I can't think of a single part of our economy, foreign policy. The Afghan pullout was an absolute disaster. It made us look weak and feckless. And the Chinese are watching. The Iranians are watching. North Korea is watching. And he's trying to now get us back into this Iran deal. And this deal is worse than the one before. We still don't have the ability to inspect anywhere at any time. We have to give them notice. It doesn't include the intercontinental ballistic program of Iran. And in 2.5 years, they will be able to get a nuke. So if there's somewhere that he has improved the American status, economy, foreign policy, please tell me what it is.
You just mentioned Iran. Kevin was there. He was at the elbow of President Donald Trump when they brought Iran to its knees. We're talking about imposing sanctions on Russia, on Vladimir Putin, for the action in Ukraine. Kevin, share some, I think this is critical insight, folks. We've got an expert, somebody who's been there and done that. And I want Kevin to explain to us a little bit what you did to Iran and what maybe we should be doing to Vladimir Putin right now.
Like what Vladimir Putin right now is putting the world on the edge of war. And we all know how threatening that can be. He put his nuclear arsenal, basically at the ready this morning. And so he's threatening us all, and we can do something about it. And I can remember we were sitting in the Oval Office, and Mercy would always sit in one of the couch chairs. It's like she always, because she—
One of the most comfortable
they're
couch
really,
chairs?
She was always, but she would be back, and the president, after listening to us, would turn to Mercy and then find out what the truth really is and what he should do. and we were talking about sanctions once, and there's like all the SWIFT this, and there are all these complicated things in the State Department, and then President Trump did something that everybody here would expect him to do because you know him so well watching him on stage. And he said, no, here's what we're going to do. If you do business with Iran, you can't do business with us, period. Okay, and then he called up our allies. You were there. And he said, okay, guys, here's how it goes. Like, if you do any business with Iran, then you can't do business with us. And so everybody else stopped doing business with Iran. Their GDP dropped 75%. 75%. That he absolutely brought that country to its knees with Trumpian common sense. And there's all these things, and he tracked people down. He had people following freighters and calling the captains and say, we're going to impound your boat if you land in Iran. Do you remember that Chinese lady who got arrested in Vancouver from Huawei? Do you remember why she got arrested? Because Huawei was doing business with Iran. Okay, that was how dogged President Trump was to bring Iran to its knees. Now, Joe Biden is trying to end that so Iran can get faster to nuclear weapons, but we should do that to Russia. We should do that to Russia right now. We could absolutely, cripple their economy with a playbook that Donald Trump invented.
And yet Joe Biden, one of the first things he said, well, we're going to impose these brutal sanctions on Russia, but we're not going to touch his oil and gas industry. I mean, it's just...
So I don't want to interrupt, but when we started this, they were selling about $2.5 million or barrels a day of oil. When we finished this, it was down to less than 200,000. 200,000. And so that's what should happen
That's
to Putin's.
pressure.
That's what should happen.
That's economic pressure.
I urge anybody to watch Donald Trump on YouTube, 2018, Brussels, Belgium, and he gave a tongue lashing to the NATO allies for their growing dependence on oil and natural gas from Russia, for not ponying up their percentage of the GDP, for relying on us. So here you are becoming increasingly dependent upon Russia, but you're turning to us to defend you against Russian aggression. Well, how does that make sense? And it was like schooling a bunch of little kids. It was remarkable what he said. And that's what you mean, Kevin, by Trumpian common sense. It makes no sense. At one time, Germany had 16 nuclear power plants. Now they've got 3, becoming increasingly dependent upon Russia, and then they turn around and they want us to defend them against Russian aggression. How does that make any sense?
Yeah, and the last thought about that is that President Trump went to the first meeting with the Germans, and he said, you have a treaty obligation to NATO to spend 2% of your GDP on defense, and you're not doing it. And he talked last night about how he threatened, okay, I'm going to stop protecting you if you're not going to help protect yourself. The Germans announced today, after watching Putin, that they're going to increase their defense spending above 2%. Okay, if they had listened to Trump a couple years ago.
Surprise. Yeah, little late.
Let's come back and bring energy and inflation and inside our own borders. One of the things that's almost criminal about inflation, it works just like a tax. Everything you touch is higher priced today. How it's only 7.5%, Kevin, I don't know, because all the stuff we're buying that we really need, fuel oil's up 46%, and gas is up 40%. Used cars are up 40%. Rent in our big cities is up about 20%. So all the stuff that you really need to survive on is up way more than 7.5%. That's why people are telling me, at least, the hurrier I go, the behinder I get. Yeah. And the longer you hang on to a dollar, the less you can do with it. It is one of the most oppressive taxes. I'll use that word again because it works just like a tax, taking money out of your pocket that you can't do anything with.
And of course, it disproportionately hurts people who are at the bottom.
That's what the question I wanted you to address. It's the regressive nature of inflation and the other side, Joe and his cohorts and AOC, they all pledge allegiance to, you poor downtrodden, and they're kicking the poor and the downtrodden.
That's right.
Tell us, Larry, you see it.
Of course, the wealthier you are, the easier it is for you to absorb any kind of increase. And the poorer you are, the more of a bite it takes out of your pocketbook. I've always been angry at the way the media refers to the recession of 2000, 2008 as the Great Recession. The one that Ronald Reagan dealt with had higher inflation, higher unemployment, much higher interest rates. He did the opposite of what the Democrats have done. He cut taxes, he slowed down the rate of domestic spending, and he continued deregulation policies, probably the only good thing that Jimmy Carter had done. This administration and the Obama administration did the opposite.
We're going to run out of time, and I can tell we are.
We're just getting warmed up.
The one thing I want to add to that is that the left does not care about poor Americans. And I don't care what their race is.
Right.
But 4 million people came off of poverty because of our economic policies. Income inequality declined by a sharper amount than all the way back to World War II. Remember, they tell us income inequality is this terrible problem. Well, it got really bad under Obama. But under President Trump, it got better, and they didn't talk about it. African-American unemployment was the lowest it's ever been. African-American home ownership grew by more than it ever has. All of this happened because of the success of Trump's supply-side policies, and right now it's being reversed radically. And the economics of it, I know everybody loves to have economic lectures. That's why I'm here. But the economics of it is just that if the price of something goes up, then maybe you switch to something else. But if it's the food that you got to eat and the gas you need to get to work, you can't switch to something else. Right. And it's the poorest Americans that can't, that they spend most of their money on stuff that are necessities. And they're just radically worse off under Biden than they've been under
Bob,
any president that I can remember.
And Bob, the Democrats pride themselves on caring about black people. And as Kevin pointed out, under the Trump administration, black unemployment lowest ever. Donald Trump put historically funding for black colleges on a permanent basis for 10 years. He pardoned Jack Johnson, the first black heavyweight champion. Even Barack Obama didn't do that. George W. Bush didn't do that. There was a 15-year effort by Ken Burns and Sylvester Stallone, the actor, to do that. Neither of those presidents did it. Donald Trump did it, and Donald Trump secured the borders. The reason that's important is that the people that are hurt the most by unskilled illegal aliens, and that's most of them unskilled, are black and brown people living in the inner city with high school or less education. And he supported school choice to give people an option out of a bad, underperforming government school.
We've talked a little bit about economic policy and how it makes a difference when you do it right, when you do it wrong. In the couple minutes we've got left, I want to go there. I remember distinctly, when COVID hit, when the pandemic hit, almost overnight we lost 20-some million, 24 million. I'm looking at my nose, 24 million jobs, literally in a matter of hours, it seemed. Down to 133 million in our total workforce. But by the time Donald Trump exited the White House, in just 8 months, from that April to December, 17 million of those jobs had come back. And what I'm recalling is that he promised us, he said, I envision a V-shaped recovery. Yeah, we went down real quick, but we're going to come back real quick. 17 million jobs in 8 months were coming back. That's a pretty rapid moving train of job creation. And Joe Biden's bragging, and I looked at the numbers, in a year after the train's already moving down the tracks and he's got all this economic momentum, he's generated 7 million jobs. So, and we're not even back quite to the point of where we were pre-pandemic in total job creation yet. So whose policies work the best? The guy that created 17 million jobs in 8 months, or the guy that's taken a year and is not even half that?
And Bob, the guy that did warp speed, that came up with these
sure
vaccines
did.
in 11 months or so.
Handed Joe Biden a vaccine, that's right.
You know, the science wasn't followed. I'm in California. Governor Gavin Newsom shut down the state in a more draconian way than did anybody else, sitting up there at the French Laundry restaurant, incurring, by the way, a $12,000 wine tab with the very people that drafted the mandates that they weren't wearing masks, they weren't engaging in social distancing. Now, I'm not that knowledgeable about wine, but I assure you that $12,000 wine tab, they were not drinking Mad Dog 2020.
$2 Chuck.
He had his own kids enjoying in-person private education, and pre-pandemic, 75% of black boys in the 3rd grade could not read at state proficiency levels, and those levels are low. Math scores, even worse. They were denied a whole year of in-school private education, in-school government education. Half of all 3rd graders pre-pandemic could not read at state proficiency levels. They were denied a whole year of in-person education. It's absolutely outrageous. The science was not followed. A third of all restaurants are now gone forever in California, most of which were owned by black and brown people, the people the left pride themselves on caring about.
The thing that, you know, it's easy to forget history, but, the president called me back. I was literally in the outback of Australia when he called me back to help lead the economic response for the White House. I went back as senior advisor during COVID. I came back in March, right at the peak of it. And people forget how little we knew back then and the craziness that was being spewed by the health officials like Tony Fauci. And if Tony Fauci had his way, then we wouldn't have had that Trump recovery because he'd have kept the economy closed probably for the whole year.
Right.
And an example of how President Trump's leadership, saved the economy is my very first meeting of the task force when I came back into the White House. He asked me to present to the task force the economic impact of their shutdowns. And I said, 2nd quarter GDP is going to be the worst quarter since the Great Depression. Those of you who saw me on TV, you remember me saying that. And if we had another quarter like that, I'm not sure the economy could recover. And after I made that presentation, all the task force members, their faces were white, they were pale. They didn't understand the harm they were doing to our country with their shutdowns. But Fauci's face was red. And he turned to the vice president and he said, I'm still in charge, right? But at that moment, everybody knew that he wasn't. And I think that any other president in that circumstance would have kept the economy closed like you see the blue states doing. And we'd have 10 or 15 or 20 million fewer jobs right now and probably a Great Depression if it wasn't for the heroic leadership of that president.
Right.
Put your hands together very loud and thank Kevin and Larry Elder for a great panel. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Rick.